The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will hold to the one and despise the other.
Hello. Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing today in the book of Proverbs, chapter 9. And let's begin by reading. One moment. Let me just take it. Sorry, I should have. One moment. One good clear of the throat. Wisdom hath builded her house. She hath hewn out her 7 pillars. She hath killed her beasts. She hath mingled her wine. She hath also finished her table. She hath sent forth her maidens. She crieth upon the highest places of the city. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. As for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him, Come, eat of my bread, and drink of the wine which I have mingled. Forsake the foolish and live, and go in the way of understanding. He that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame, and he that rebuketh a wicked man getteth himself a blot. Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. For by me thy days shall be multiplied, and the years of thy life shall be increased. If thou be wise, thou shalt be wise for thyself. But if thou scornest, thou alone shalt bear it. A foolish woman is clamorous. She is simple, and knoweth nothing. For she sitteth at the door of her house, on a seat in the high places of the city, to call passengers who go right on their ways. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. As for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him, Stolen waters are sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he knoweth not that the dead are there, and that her guests are in the depths of hell. And then the Proverbs of Solomon begin. So that this introduction where we have this interplay, these first 9 chapters of this sort of the family of wisdom, the father, the mother, and then wisdom herself speaks. There's a lot of speaking of the Lord, but not a lot of thus saith the Lord, which is interesting because it's a different perspective. Not that it's less, revelatory or from God in that sense, because wisdom, of course, true wisdom is from God, because it was with him from the beginning, and grew up with him like a child. But, in a sense that it is like, again, he portrays it as something external to himself, because we can also use wisdom without, it makes us like God because he is wise, right? In fact, that's what you could say the temptation of man was, right? To become wise like God, to know good and evil. But first, wisdom is good and important, but, I always like to emphasize, when I was young, I thought of my faith as this almost intellectual pursuit. And it didn't occur to me that, that's available to you. For some people who are more simple-minded, it's not quite that way. Now, just because someone, when I say simple-minded, let's say less talented, because even the least talented of us, who may not, maybe it's not obvious how talented they are because it's not obvious the kind of talent. Like you go to school and they recognize certain kind of things like reading, writing, and arithmetic. If you're good at those things, they'll notice, oh, he's gifted in those things. But they're not necessarily going to notice like things like, oh, I love, this is a very loving. They're not going to see that necessarily. I mean, they may, but there's no grade for it. There's no like, this person's gifted in that. Now, maybe in some churches, where you have a lot of people who care about each other, you can recognize people's subtle gifts like that. So it's not obvious. Intellect is not the only kind of thing you can be gifted in, is what I'm saying. And so, in the matter of being simple or wise is not necessarily a matter of intellect. It's just a matter of information. Because even the simplest among us doesn't, it doesn't matter if it's, because putting 2 and 2 together is not hard. And with wisdom, it's often like that, just putting 2 and 2 together. But even that, unless you've been instructed, who knows, right? So you don't know what to do in a situation unless someone told you what to do. When I was a kid, I was simple. Like all children, you come out, not all, just some kids maybe have a little bit of conniving in them, We all, certainly I wasn't a child who didn't know how to sneak around and stuff like that. And try to deceive my parents and such. I wasn't really ever told not to. That's the thing. But first of all, let's go back to this. We could go on and on. Wisdom hath builded her house; she hath hewn out her 7 pillars. Interesting. Well, the 7 pillars of wisdom. What are the 7 pillars of wisdom? I don't know if I could put a label on it. It'd be something interesting to think about, reflecting on the past 8 chapters, because this is like a conclusion. She's hewn out her 7. Now, it is not necessarily to list each one, because in a sense, it is a metaphor. 7 pillars is a metaphor for a completed structure, because it's a perfect number. So when she hews out her 7 pillars, it's like, that is a kind of a perfection. The 7 pillars of wisdom, whatever that is. Because there's also a symbolic feast being laid out. Now, we should understand this metaphor from the book of Revelation, where we talk about the marriage supper of the Lamb. So, Paul, you don't believe the marriage supper of the Lamb is literal? It's like, I believe it's better than some literal feast. Okay, it is the reuniting, not reuniting. We'll be introduced to Christ. It's not so much about the food and the wine and all that. It's about, she's calling you to, just like we talk about, you got to eat and drink Christ's body and blood. There's a literal way to look at that. And there's also a ritual that goes along with it, which is nothing wrong with the ritual per se, except that you should forget what it really represents. Because it really represents that I'm literally eating his body and blood. No, it means that literally you owe him your life. You know what I mean? You need him to live. We owe Jesus everything. And so we in that sense. But also when you sit down and eat with some, he says, I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone will open to me, I will come to him and sup with him and he with me. It's like when you sit down together, like for a conversation, to eat with someone one-on-one. And wisdom also lays out a table. She's killed her beasts, she's mingled her wine, she's furnished her table. She lays out like this feast, and it's the knowledge of wisdom. It's the thing that's the understanding. If you want to understand, you need understanding. It's like, well, I have a table filled with ways to help you understand. And that's wisdom. Portrayed that way. Like just as the whore, she sets her things too. She sets her bed. She wants to seduce you. Wisdom also wants to, not to seduce you, but not in that sense that we think of it as sexual seduction, but in the sense of like we wouldn't use it in the modern sense because, as I've remarked in the past many times, the word seduce in English has taken on a mostly sexual connotation where it didn't used to have that, and I've demonstrated that in other contexts, so that we don't need to go into that. But anyways. So instead of seduce, entice. And I think that is used elsewhere in the scripture in a positive sense. Because entice could be to sin, but also entice can be in a good sense. Let me entice you to righteousness. Let me entice you to listen to wise things. And she wants to also entice. She wants to put something out attractive. Because wisdom delights in being clever and in seeing the fruit of her understanding in you. You know what I mean? In the sense of when you act wisely. I tell you, every time I do something wise, like anticipate a problem and act ahead of time to prevent it from happening, just in the simple mechanistic, worldly sense, it gives me a good feeling. And spiritually, when I'm wise, also I get a really good feeling. Because as I've said, if you lack peace, let me tell you something. If you're not obedient to the Lord, there's no peace quite like knowing that you obey God, at least in the grotesque. I mean the general way you live your life. It's like that your general walk daily is not just from one sin to the next. You know what I mean? You're busy about your business. You've got your mind on good things. You're not biting and scratching at everyone around you, but you are doing God's will as best you can, and you make mistakes sometimes, right? But that's what that will give you some baseline of peace, I hope, if you have faith and if you've delved into the Word enough to be that, or at least to be, hopefully you have a good measure of how, is that really what your life is? I mean, sometimes we excuse ourselves from things. I don't know. But anyways, because like when people lack peace, I always think like, well, for my money, no matter what I'm going through, it's always been the case that it was always worse if there was some sin in my life that I could point to, that I'd be like, well, this could be a punishment from God because, maybe he doesn't like what I'm doing, and that doesn't make me feel at peace, because then I feel like the Lord is chastising me and he's not happy with me. And it's like, it's not like I think I'm going to lose my salvation. It's like, no, I mean, that would be easier. I'm going to have to actually face him. I'm going to have to actually correct this. It's like losing your salvation. But, oh, well, I guess it's lost. I just go out. No, it's not that easy. It's got to be corrected. It's not just, so you can't just go slouching off into hell. You've been chosen. So I don't get to go slouching off to hell. I have to work with him or whatever. It's like, obviously, I don't consider it my work. It's his work. But also, on the other hand, it's like, I know he expects me to be a willing participant. Because I believe, don't I? And I've heard him, and he told me. If others haven't told you, let me tell you now, God expects you to do with him, to work with him. Not to get saved, but that's because you are. Because you are. You say, well, I'm not interested in that. It's like, well, maybe you aren't. Maybe you aren't. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm wrong. I have the wrong man. She wants to entice you. And she sends forth her maidens. These young ladies, come eat. They're all pure and all that, but it's like ladies you might like to have a conversation with. Maybe a young lady you might want to propose marriage to. Well, not one who's making a proposal to you for the evening. She wants to show off what a good cook she is, Maybe there's a girl you'd like to bring home to mom. So whoever is simple, let him come in hither. For he that wanteth understanding, she saith unto him. I love the way the metaphors are almost identical. It's like all these girls going out trying to get men to come and listen. It's funny. Because it's like, I always take that attitude about my faith. Like Paul said, always be ready to give a reason of the hope that lies in you. But if you turn that around in your head, it's like, that means like what I have is something really valuable that people should be looking at like, hey, what do you got? What is that? Why? What is that that makes you different? What is that going on that you have that I can't explain it exactly, but I want that. That lively, full of lifeness that I don't know. I can't say I've always had. I don't always like shine like a bright burning beacon myself. But the point is, Jesus told us to let our light so shine before men. So I have this expectation that if it's not, it's not that I've never been noted as a Christian without my having to explain it to people, but. And that is good. Like I said, I would never want someone to be like shocked. When I was young, I remember someone be like, I never thought you'd be a Christian. It's like, oh, okay. I knew why back then, but now I don't like that to be the case. You know, when people are like, what's that stupid grin on that guy's face? And then if they found, why are you always seem so pleased about something? You know, I try not to seem too goofy or anything like that, but I always try to exude that. I like to look hopeful. I try, also because I have to make an effort at it, because I don't have a face that says hopeful and happy. Like, that's not my when I just, you know, my relaxed face is not one of hope and happiness. It just tends to look very, people say I look angry. Even when I smile, I think they think I'm like, you know, whatever. I don't know. I don't know what people think. I don't even really care. That's part of the problem. Someone told me once I should care more what they think. And you should take some care. You can't be careless of people, you know? That's something I know. You know, but you don't want to take so much care that it becomes foolishness, okay? Eat of my bread, drink of the wine, and you must eat of my flesh and drink of my... You know, like I said, this is that part... You know, when I talk about communion, this metaphor is part of that. You got to commune with Jesus. It's not just on Sunday taking bread and wine. That is a one... You know, like I said, I say... I would not... You know, you need to do that. It says... You know, if you take it literally, you got to do that to live. You know, and baptism, you know, baptism doth now save us. Look at all the things we do are for our salvation. Every single one. Not that it to earn salvation. It is all a positive addition built on the foundation, which is nothing more than faith in Christ. It is his work built upon it that builds us up into the image of Christ, you know, which is what we are trying to do. You know, and I'm like Jesus wants, you know, he said, well, he wants to come and find the fire already kindled. You know, he wants to find us occupying until he comes. So he's given us talents. He expects us to do things with them. And the more time you have in life, you know, like I said, as I get older, I get this panic, like I got to get more done for the Lord. Not like I'm afraid I'm going to lose my salvation. It's like, no, I don't know. I don't even think in terms of reward, because there's no way you could... it's too crass. I just don't think, when God is already a reward, what am I adding to that? Yeah, I mean, really, that I give a crud about. What am I adding to my reward as far as God? I guess my own position among others. It's like, I don't, you know, how high are you going to go? I mean, really, I don't care about that. You know, I always think, like I said, you have access to God. So what else? What's next? You know, that isn't like, doesn't everyone get, you know, there are things I'd like to do. Like if it's like, well, if it's, you know, if like there's a long checklist and you only get so many or something like that, there might be things, you know, I don't know. I don't know what the limitations could possibly be beyond after that. And I don't particularly care. It says, the eye hath not seen, the mind hath not seen, eye hath not seen, nor the heart of man conceived of the things that the Lord has prepared for us. So, you know, it's fun to imagine, but I'm guessing like everything. I remember I talked to a guy once about this subject, and he was like, he just said he hoped there were machines to work on. And I just laughed because I never thought of that. But I'm like, you know, I'm not going to deny it. I just laughed because it was funny. I'd never considered it. Because like machines are the bane of my existence. I do have a love-hate relationship with machines. I do appreciate them deeply. I do. I love my machines. My slaves are my precious servants. You know, my robot slaves. You know, my chainsaw. I just need another robot to handle all my machines, and then I'll be in business. Okay. All right. So forsake the foolish and live. Go in the way of understanding. Very simple thing, you know. But we're going to start getting into more exact descriptions. We get our first little proverb formulated sort of bit of wisdom here, right? He that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame, and he that rebuketh a wicked man getteth himself a blot. It almost seemed like I thought we were going to suddenly shift over into this mode, but it doesn't give us too many of these in a row right now, as it's going to be later on, as you'll see proverb after proverb. And proverb becomes like this series of axiomatic statements, though you could say a lot of these are axiomatic. I mean, literally verse 6 could be an axiomatic thing. You could pluck it out of context and it always makes sense. You know what I mean? But again, you have that, it presumes you've put everything into context, meaning what is foolish and what is understanding, you know. These things are arbitrary until you actually have wisdom. Because like a fool doesn't know, he can't tell the difference between the whore's wisdom and that sweet girl in white's wisdom. They don't know the difference of the wisdom. They just see the desire to have something. That's the simple, but one track mind, thinking with only one of their minds, I said minds because I didn't want to say something a little less crude, a little more crude. Yeah, so a scorner. Let's look at the word scorner. And as with all Proverbs, in my opinion, like I said, that you got to think about it in terms of the wisdom of Ecclesiastes. There's a time for every purpose under heaven, and I'll show you examples as we go along, where Proverbs will contradict itself, quote unquote, in context, where it'll say, hey, don't reprove a fool, and it'll say then in the next verse, go ahead and reprove a fool, because it goes back to what I talked about, things that are contradictory in Jesus saying, and I only say that because they apparently clash, right? Jesus says, "Let your light so shine before men," and he says, "Hey, when you do your alms, don't sound a trumpet before you." Well, wait a second, I'm doing something nice. Shouldn't I let people see it? Let your light so shine before men. Hey, everybody, this is what you should do. Give your money to the poor. I'm giving all my money to the poor. Look at the example of me. I mean, imagine if you're a rich person and you're going to give away all your money till you're impoverished. Like, why wouldn't, that, honestly, in that context, maybe that makes sense to actually let your light so shine. Because Ananias and Sapphira, they sold a piece of property. And they said, we're giving it all to the church. But they held back a half of it. And as Peter said, wasn't it in your power to give as much? You could have given just half. Why'd you lie to the Holy Ghost? Now you're going to die. And that was in the church time, so it's serious. Giving is serious and all, and how you try to present yourself to other people. Do you fear God or do you fear men? That's the question. You know what I mean? Because it is a question. A lot of times people do things outwardly because they hope to be seen of men. That was one of the reasons. There's things behind it. There's wheels within wheels. Why are you doing this? Is it to be seen of men? Well, then, if that is the case, sometimes the temptation to lie about it, to exaggerate your generosity. Whereas you could just simply get rid of all the money and God will see it. And you know what? And, whatever. People might find out. It might be good for people to find out. And you know what? Don't sweat that. The fact that you did it, don't stop happening after it's done. Once you did it, you did it. You can talk about it 10 years later. And maybe it's worth talking about. Maybe it should be talked about right away. Someone, he confessed all his billions. I'm not saying, whatever. I'm not giving instructions. I don't think. Maybe I am. Maybe the Holy Spirit's instructing somebody. I don't know. But reproveth a scorner. Like I said, there's going to be that. Because sometimes people got to be reproved. It says in the law, Leviticus 19:17. I've quoted it before, right? Thou shalt not hate thy neighbor in the heart. You shall in any wise rebuke your neighbor and not suffer sin upon him. That's basically the idea. You got to rebuke your neighbor. All right, but what, that's presuming, that just says it like you got to do it. Well, no matter what, I'm a robot. I just have to, we're Christians. We're not Jews, so we don't have to be robotic in our obedience. And even then they had to be wise. And even Jesus called them out on their rigid interpretations that allowed all these loopholes that were all unrighteous. Because the intent of the law was for the people to be holy and righteous, but they instead took the law as like a piece of Swiss cheese through which they could see the light of sin. We can see the sins, the way we can get to our sins. We can have adultery and eat, and we can do all these things because we found ways that we could override the law of God and make it of none effect. I got the word scorner up here. All right. A scorner is a lutz. Oh, lutz in Hebrew. See the phonetic spelling. And my nose is starting to itch on the left nostril, and it really wants me to sneeze or pick it. Because ever since I had an operation, now 6 years ago, wow, or more, 7? Wow. Yeah, that never entirely healed. Yeah. Though I do breathe better, and I don't regret it, but it was a trade-off. So, ambassador, having derision, interpreter, to make a mocker. Interesting, ambassador. I need to clear my throat for a second here. One moment. Sorry, the audio lags behind the video part, so that was not a perfect thing. You know, this is much better than the old days. I feel bad about those studies, the ones with the worst sniffling. Maybe someone should maybe it was a what's the worst one? I'll go back and redo that first, right? So a primitive verb properly, to make mouths at, to scoff, hence from the effort to pronounce a foreign language, to interpret, or generally intercede. Yeah, I remember studying this word and being like, wow, that's a lot of different meaning. Interpreter and also scoffer. Fascinating. Because I think about, like, in a sense, I guess a scoffer is someone who doesn't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like you say, like in metaphorical sense, like if I start saying, hey, you know, I got this great idea, it's gonna work like this. He's like, pah, I don't know what you're talking about. It ain't gonna work. I'm scoffing at it, right? Like, hey, you're a foreigner. Speak English, dude. You know, like one who reacts to you as though you talk nonsense. That's a great way of thinking of it, right? Thank you, Lord, for insight. Right? One who regards the one who's speaking sense as though they speak nonsense. You ever had that happen? Oh, yes. What? Are you kidding? Oh, do that? You know? Right. That's what a scoffer is. A scorner. So when you reprove a scorner, someone who thinks what you're telling them, someone who already regards the reproof as, you know, they don't care. This is equivalent to what Jesus said, casting your pearls before swine. Right? It says, preach the gospel to every creature. Cast not your pearls before swine. Okay. You're asking, judge not that you be not judged, but cast not your pearls before swine, gentlemen. Thank you, Lord, for making that very clear to me. No, you know why he does? It makes it unclear. It's because he wants us to depend on the Holy Spirit, because wisdom is not so simple as to say when and how. You want to just rigorously just apply a filter, like, okay, I want to disregard everybody. No. You know what I mean? You don't just disregard everybody. You can't just say everyone's, you don't know who all the scorner is. If you have a scorner, you may or may not know you got a scorner. But if you have a scorner, if you reprove someone who's a scorner, you're gonna get to yourself shame. For example, a young person, you go to school. Let's say you have a friend and they're sexually promiscuous, right? And they scorn the idea of fidelity. They scorn the idea of being chaste, and waiting for their marriage. And they go about and they get in the trouble that young people do, right? And you try to sell them, you shouldn't do that, and explain to them it's wrong. And then they go around, they could very well go around, a certain type of person, a true scorner will go around and mock you. Do you hear what so-and-so said? They said da-da-da-da. What a prude. You get shame among the scorners. Those who scorn the truth hang out with other people who scorn the truth, and they sit around mouthing scorn against the truth, against righteousness. And it often has a lot to do with sex, because like I said, people want, and notice wisdom starts off with sex and fear of God. It's murder and mayhem. Mayhem is the love part. Murder and mayhem. Not that mayhem is generally a word for love, but I'm just saying, for when we're talking about fornication, we'll call it mayhem. Just for a joke. And so, that was the primary concern about wisdom, like because those are the temptations. I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to do the opposite, right? Both, it's an interesting opposite tug of love and hate in evil. You know what I mean? You got to hate evil and love the right. Or you end up loving the right and hating the evil, or loving the evil and hating the right. And that's what a scorner does. They don't, like, the words of God are to them like the words of a babbling foreigner. Thou shalt not blah, 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 blah. Who cares, man? Come here, baby. You know? He that rebuketh the wicked man gets himself out. You hear what this goody-goody's got to say about what we're doing? Make note, fellas, who's untrustworthy. Make note, fellas, who to leave out of our fun. You'll have a blot among the scorners and a blot among the wicked. Who cares? Again, once you know the wicked, you got them properly identified. You don't have to keep, I tell you what, I admire those who by patience preach to people who are, like, to go back to the same person who keeps spitting in your face is kind of, I'll tell you what, the only example I could think of that, where, because you're not in bondage to do that, unless you happen to be in bondage, actually. And that was the example I thought of. There was a movie, Christian Bale was in it, right? It was a prisoner of war movie. I think it was the one with Christian Bale, and I forgot what it was called. No, it's not that one. It's a Japanese prisoner of war, Christian, but there was a Christian theme in it because he kept preaching, in a sense, through his actions and sticking to it. But the point was, yeah, you're a prisoner. You have no choice but to keep casting your pearls in front of the swine until perhaps, well, either they finish ripping you to pieces because you have no choice, or perhaps the sword of the Lord pierces even their heart, or at least it brings about their condemnation. How many men's souls. Because that's the thing is, like, I'll tell you what, I ran into a Universalist, and I love Universalists. I wish I could go with them. I wish I could believe in them. But you understand the wickedness of men and the choices they make and how you don't understand what it does to your soul. That's the problem, is good people don't understand what it does to your soul when you do bad things and how it drags you down. They've never gone down dark places, Some of these people, some folks are quite good and haven't really explored the darker side of things, and I'm not advocating it, Solomon talked about it a bit, like how he had tried madness and folly a bit, So he could understand. In some ways, I'll tell you what, unless you've been down the path of drugs and alcohol, you don't know what it's like. Not that I say, and it's, hold on a second. Yeah, the wrong screen. Well, whatever. Okay, well. There's not a button. There's like 20 buttons in front of me. Man, get it up. There we go. I like to keep it on the other screen so I can go back to that one. Hold on one second. All right, we're good. We're good on time. So, reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. If you recognize someone as a true scorner, you can recognize the fact that, like, reproving them is not going to, you're not going to, thus you've gained your brother. But I would be careful about it, Careful of the judgment you judge on people. Hold on a second. I was not, the way I look at it is this. Paul says one plants, another reaps. One plants, another waters. Jesus used the analogy of sowing seeds. Seeds are not quite pearls. Pearls are like pearls of wisdom, things of great value. I wouldn't necessarily go to someone with, someone who doesn't appreciate what you're talking about. Now, a seed is a more subtle thing. It's something that's just meant to be something that can grow. And planting a seed in someone's mind, or, which could be just a snippet of the gospel just like someone was distressed and telling them you pray for them and encouraging them to pray to God, even if you don't know who they may be an atheist for all you know. Maybe you don't. You know, if it was an atheist, I wouldn't knowingly tell them that. Because it might irritate them. I would tell them I'll pray for them because it's like, whatever, you can't stop me. But I'm not going to tell them to pray. Well, unless they had real distress and they came to me, I don't know what to do. Well, go to the Lord. And then if they, when they're in distress, I wouldn't be like, well, I won't tell them to pray because God, they're an atheist. Now, who knows? Give them my. Hold on a second. Okay. So, be careful how you judge people, especially the less you know them. I mean, when someone's truly a fool, a scorner, or whatever, Christ came to save such. I also say it's true. I was once a fool. I was once lost. I was never a scorner of God. I'll tell you that. Or of goody-goodies or people who did good things. I didn't disrespect that. I just disregarded it for the most part. I was just like, well, I'm saved, so I believe. So I'm young and, I'm 17. Why do I got to worry about my sins? I hardly done any yet. And I really wanted to get at it. It's fools, because I think that because my father was raised wrong, he wanted to raise me right, and he didn't do a terrible job. I always say good things about my dad, but it was. Hey, were there any holes in my upbringing? Sure. Did I raise my kids perfect? Probably not, but I tried to improve on it. And if you improve on it, you equip people better to deal with the different things in life. Your children, they'll be wiser. I hope them be wiser and not be as big a fool as I was. I see they are. A lot of times people really screw up how they teach their kids not to be a fool. Because they always think of their mistakes in terms of like that. Don't be a fool. Don't get married early. Oh, no, don't have children. No! Go to college and then be an old maid till you're like 50 and then maybe you could freeze some eggs and get a surrogate to make a baby for you. I mean, they're insane. Whatever you do, don't do that. Oh, no. Don't get married. That's the most terrifying, awful thing you could do. It's stunning. I had that on me, too, but I was like, yeah, right. At least about the marriage thing, and I wasn't anxious to have kids. I mean, we didn't start too soon. We were like 24, 23, okay, whatever. It's kind of young. I always said I liked being a young parent, and I'm glad I was. Glad my oldest got the youngest and the most energetic version of me, and the older ones that get the later kids get the wiser, older, perhaps gentler, not entirely version. In some ways more hardened, in some ways softened, For by me, so when you say, okay, wait. Oh, wait, we almost, yeah. So give instruction to a wise man, all right, lest he hate thee, rebuke a wise man and he will love you. If you reprove a scorner, he's not going to like it, but a wise person's going to love it. Oh, that lag is annoying. Sorry, after that sneeze, all of a sudden, the thing got a little runny. I didn't expect that. So, yeah, of course, that's very obvious. So that's your dichotomy between the scorner is going to hate you if you rebuke him, and a wise man is going to love you. And so what? The whole world exists somewhere between those two extremes, between the absolute foolish scorner, who absolutely just is like, I don't know, righteousness, blah, and then the wise man who's like, oh, you're right. Oh, you're true. You're calling me back to righteousness. But it helps you know people. When you have true wisdom yourself, and you have understanding, and you try to communicate it to other people, you'll know who those are that scorn wisdom, and you'll know those who love it, who are imbued with it, who are themselves wise. Because when they rebuke you, they love you. It's funny. I got that confused because I was in my mind thinking of my friend Sam Shamoon, who rebuked me on the Trinity, And he seems to have loved me ever since, because he's probably, like I said, he seems so stunned by the fact that I was persuaded as probably an apologist who's used to just stiff-necked resistance. And I was ready to resist. Believe me, I don't just give up my position. But he brought up something I hadn't considered, and I was sort of like taken aback by it, and I had thought about it real fast. I'm like, boy, okay, that's wrong. That aspect, I'm like, okay, then this. And then he's like, okay, because it was really just one step away. But from convincing me. And so, and it's funny. So you also may find if you go around rebuking people as a hobby, or not a hobby, a profession, meaning you're like a professional apologist for Christ, you may find you get too used to the hate. I could feel it on him too. I could tell he was always bracing, ready for me to just start saying nasty things. It was a funny conversation, especially from my perspective, because I could feel his reactions in the things he was writing. So I've been on the receiving end of that. Have I rebuked anyone and turned them? I guess. I don't know. I've had people say nice things about being rebuked, because not everyone I've rebuked has been a fool, and it's not like I've never ever rebuked anybody. I can always think, my wife has always thanked and loved me for my gentle rebuke. And I should say this also. The manner you deliver... here's the thing. You can be in danger of prejudicing the response by the way you lay out the rebuke. All right? That's something you got to think about. The way I rebuke somebody can create their response. If you get somebody angry with the way you rebuke them, you should analyze also the fact, say, well, is there any way that I said that potentially? Because a lot of times people get this really bad attitude as Christians that they should just well, Jesus is the way, F you. And then that's supposed to convince that I just preach the gospel. It's now that's an exaggeration, but I'm not kidding. There's a lot of mean, nasty Christians online arguing with the unbelievers, and that's the way they argue. Thanks, folks. Really, you're doing a bang-up job. That's, and if you're not getting a good response to that, let me say, it's not necessarily the fault of the hearers. You got to be a little more clever than that in this day and age. You don't think everybody who speaks English has some idea about Jesus? You think you can talk English about Jesus and not have 1,000 different opinions, just intrude on that conversation? I don't even bother to talk to people much about it. I just talk about it here. I do try to plant seeds. Like I said, I have my way. And so I preach the gospel wherever I can, every opportunity. But I try not to. I certainly don't do it in a way that I don't get a lot of scorn or shame or blots from people in the way I do it, because I don't do it in a way that elicits that response. Even from scorners, I get very mild, because I usually craft my message to scorners in such a way to kind of shut them up, so that they just go away. I don't want to deal with this guy's faith, and they don't want to talk about it even because they don't want to draw attention to me. I like that. I like sharing links with people and getting arguments with people who don't go. There's the thing. I know people who could make me a hate watch thing on my other channel, where people are angry and oh, look at this, they're making. But there are people who find that, who hate me, who do not share it with their friends because they do not want anyone else to see it. That kind of thing. And in some ways, I because they're afraid of the power. That's the way I look at it. Or what I'll put my own positive spin on it. Why should I get down about other people's inability to receive the messages, right? And it's hey, I'm not required to make them hear, only to preach faithfully, right? We don't have to make people hear. We just have to preach the message in faithfulness and walk ourselves faithful to it. You don't want to have it talking out of one side of your mouth and acting out of the other. Give instruction to a wise man, he will be wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. Because wise men are oh, instruct me. Hold on a second. I don't regret. I mean, I tell you what, I don't enjoy. I don't like. I love machines. I just love working on them. I've always been curious about machines, right? But I certainly don't regret obtaining the skills I have. The things I can do in regards to an automobile, or the things I can do in regards to constructing, structures and the internal stuff, and all the things that of necessity of life. The different systems I understand, even learning to code on the computer and all that. So I don't regret obtaining any of that knowledge, even though it's not all necessarily, obviously, wisdom of the Lord. But through the fear of the Lord, all the other wisdom I learn becomes more fruitful. You know what I mean? Like, I might have learned how to fix cars to none effect other than just to earn bread. But yet it may serve in some critical thing for the Lord. I don't know exactly how. I know a mechanic who lived his life like that. He saw his work as part of an extension of his service, as we all ought to see our calling in life. As far as the way we earn our bread, we should seek a way to somehow also, we should do it as those serving the Lord. And that's also best if it's somehow we can find some sort of overlap. It's some occupations I understand are going to be hard to understand. How is this serving the Lord? Well, sometimes it's like about the money we earn to sustain ourselves. If we have extra, well, then we can do something with that. But and then we can think of our job as part of our calling, because it's what gives us the ability to bless men in the name of the Lord. Okay, we got a little more time here. That's fine. I'm not trying to slow walk it or anything. Yeah, and so those of us who crave understanding, God has taught me. I tell you what, for me, it has been an ascent upwards. I don't feel like I understand less. I said, there's things I memorized long ago that I don't remember. I don't remember all the names of the kings of Israel and Judah. Though you could probably ask me, you could throw an Old Testament name at me and say, was that a king or not? And I think I could get it. I think I bet I could score a passing grade on that on that test, or maybe an A. Maybe not perfect though, right? No, because I've forgotten. Rehoboam, Jeroboam, Hezekiah, Zedekiah, I don't know. David, Solomon, Rehoboam, Jehu. The order is beyond me. But we've grown wiser. That kind of knowledge there's some utility to it. But the knowledge of how to act, the knowledge of how to speak in the right word at the right time. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's said over and over in the Proverbs. Because you got to know, understanding, that God exists and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek them, and also a rewarder of those who disobey his will, as is revealed to, we know what is right and wrong in our conscience, even the heathen do, on some level enough where we can be judged, and the Lord will show it. He will bring your own conscience forward to testify against you, against the eternal. The only plea I expect to have is because I trusted in Jesus, and not only did I trust in him for my salvation, but because I trusted in him, I feared also, and I acted with the talents I had to increase them and to do the Lord's work in the world, because I knew he wasn't effing around. Sorry for the profanity, even if it is. But I use that because there is a profane way people approach Christianity where they do it as if he doesn't mean business. He comes back expecting profit. I'm coming to set the world on fire. What do you think he's going to do if he comes and he finds it's not already kindled? What will he think of his servants then? Well, I'm not going to be in that. I'm not going to have nothing to do with that. Not me. The knowledge of the holy is understanding. You got to know what's holy. You got to know the difference between the holy and the profane. It's not enough to just understand, okay, the toilet is profane. The whore's bed is profane. Profane is Latin. We often think of pro as for, but it also means like out front of and in a sense away from, like prohibit. Like no. And profane, fane is like I think the word means something like a sanctuary, a temple. Is where it's from. It means like far from the sanctuary, far from the temple, far from that holy place. Now, that's still just a metaphor, because what is holiness really? Holiness is very much the idea of separateness, something that is kept separate for a purpose, separate from all the normal things of life. The profane, yes, the bathroom and the bedroom are the normal things of life. And the part about they're not particularly sacred. People have tried to sacretize them. In a sense, there's a sacred bond between, and there is something sacred to a marriage bond and all that stuff. But I mean, no, but in a sense, it's also just common to man. That's why it doesn't belong on the altar. I mean, it's not really, and in fact, after doing it right, you were unclean. Now, Christians, we think of marriage as sacred. Yes, it's sacred in the sense of it's a sacred covenant. But the sex act, though the consummation of it is itself not some sort of holy thing. You know, it's an unclean thing technically in the Old Testament sense. Not that we regard it as such, but it is not something, that's not something that's part of temple activity, right? Of course, I wouldn't exaggerate that. But everything that is outside of that, it is those things which are not clean and pure and outside of that, carnality. Because there's something about carnality that is really not part of God, Our sexual appetites and our physical appetites are not really, you're not going to hunger or thirst ever again, because you probably don't need to do either. You're going to have a well of water in you, spring up into everlasting life. You won't need to take on things to continue living, I believe. Though there is bread of heaven you will be able to consume and to enjoy. And I don't understand how that goes per se, how necessary it is. I'm not, making statements or anything that you need to take on faith. But, we don't know what it's going to be like exactly, but it's going to be holy compared to this. The angels are called holy. They are neither marry nor are given in marriage. They're often even thought of as without genitals. I certainly, as someone who's wounded in the stones, I don't really worry about genitals. I don't hope to get back my ghostly missing one. I have no pretensions about such things. I don't mind, because it's like I'm not there to possess my masculine earthly self, but rather to possess that thing which is made like Christ, like unto his glorious body, right? And so that's where we are. That's the true calling of holiness, is to the ultimate state of holiness, which we are not just getting imputed to us, but which through the resurrection is a fact of our, I don't know if I want to use the word material existence, but a fact of our corporeal existence, which means in the body. Because we will have a body, just like God has a body, but not a material body. And not a body made up of atoms. It's made up of things that we have never encountered, and that aren't apparent. I don't know. Are they left? Would there be a signature? I don't know. So to know, to really understand the idea of holiness, what purity really looks like. Yes, sexual purity, physical in that sense, but also inward purity. Like it says, whoever looks on a woman to lust after hath committed adultery with her already in his heart, Jesus said. And he requires us to have a purity that goes inwardly, a knowledge of the holy inside. He says, out of the heart proceeds forth murder, fornication, wickedness, and all these things. We need to have, like we sing as Christians, you may have heard that, the song, purify my heart, make it be as gold. We need our hearts purified, because the heart is desperately wicked above all things. And so there are holinesses that go beyond the outward, obviously. It is a holiness of mind. We do not hate our brother in our heart, as the Old Testament even said. The things Jesus said were not entirely new in the New Testament. I see them in the Old Testament all the time. And what's funny, like people always say, the Jews didn't really believe in an afterlife. The Old Testament doesn't teach about the afterlife. It's like, that's not, the New Testament doesn't really teach about the afterlife if you really know it, per se. Like it doesn't, like, the snap easy answers you think and want are true, are not the things you think they are. And of course many people in the Old Testament times before the New believed in the afterlife. There was a whole debate between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. But when I read the Old Testament, I see it literally bristling. Because like when it calls us, in fact, when it was talking about, listen to me and live, right? Who findeth me finds life and obtains favor of the Lord. And he that sinneth against me wrongeth against his own soul. And all that hate me love death. I last time I wish I had said something, that makes me think of resurrection. Because where else is these promises coming from? Wisdom doesn't do that much for you. I mean, come on. It might be just more practical to murder somebody. Especially if you're like 90, right? And I'm not saying, I'm just saying the wisdom, the children, like Jesus said. Jesus himself said it. The children of this world are wiser in their generations than the children of light. Meaning in this time, their wisdom works better right now. Often. Not in every case, right? I mean, not the full wickedness of the wicked, of the folly. I'm not talking about the folly of fools. I'm talking about the wisdom of this world, of the children of this world, of the princes of this world, which come to naught, but yet they have a wisdom that works. And sometimes it beats ours, because we end up dead. It's like, well, you know what? We can just kill you because we don't like what you say. And then that's the end of you, blah, 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 and then the resurrection comes and, okay, but it's like, hey, that's a heck of a bet to have to make. But I'm willing to make it. I'll die for the truth. I don't say that lightly. You know what I mean? I don't. Because, like I write songs sometimes I think, like, if the wrong people get in charge, I'm dead. Eventually. It's like eventually. Or whatever. I know that, I'm not dramatic about it. Long ago I had people suggesting things and making threats. I don't really, if people really want to kill you, they don't make threats. They invite you to hang out, That's why there was a guy who wanted me to come hang out and I didn't want to go. And I'm like, yeah, well, you're acting threatening and inviting me to come far from my home into your neighborhood. How about you come into my neighborhood if you want to hang out? And so blah. Okay, which verse do we leave off of? That's all I'm really looking to find out. We didn't have a whole lot. Yeah, we're going to read into chapter 10 next time for sure. Beginning wisdom, knowledge, okay. Let's see. Well, wait. By me thy days shall be multiplied, the years of life increased. Right. That's one thing. But again, Ecclesiastes will say, I saw that it's not always that way. Sometimes the wicked just go on living long, and I don't get it. But they eventually die, don't they? He's like, yeah, eventually they do. Yeah. And then I realized that when the houseman got, I realized there was a judgment. That God is eternal. And the wicked do not get away with whatever it is they think they got away with. And those that suffered and those that did right will be comforted. That's always been God's promise from the beginning, is his comfort and also his salvation. It's implicit. He doesn't spell it out early on because he's not making promises early on. It's just a hope he's dangling. Hope. Thou shalt bruise his heel, but it shall crush thy head. Out of order. Okay. If thou be wise, thou should be wise. All right, we better start off in... Let's start with verse 12, just because 11 I felt like I did, Yeah, your life is increased, sure. most of the time, right? I mean, and that's the truth. Like, all things being equal, all things just being left to their own, and people, and not, and God having no purpose other than, because it all depends often what His purpose is for us. If I have to live and testify, there's no one who can touch me. If this is the end of Paul, then I will have my final testimony. I will be offered, and then I will stand before the judgment. I'm ready. I mean, I'm not really ready in my own opinion, but ready enough because the Lord has made me ready. I don't have to do anything more to get ready to see Christ, though I would like to do a lot more. That's in a perfectly acceptable mode of being as a Christian. You don't want to be fretting yourself as though your salvation depends on your works. It's wrong. It's a wrong attitude. But there's nothing wrong with being like, oh, what an unprofitable servant I am, because I've only done that which is expected of me. That is a good attitude also, as long as it's productive and edifying, meaning you're still being built up in it. You're pushing yourself to do more, right? I mean, in athletics, you push yourself to do more, to work harder, to become faster, stronger. Same thing with the things of God. You want to push to learn more, and also in your life to behave better and more like Christ. Anyways, thanks for joining me. Look forward to being back tomorrow, by all means, if by all means possible. Until then, remember, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy.
The light of the body is the eye, if therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will